So I wanted to start off and say that, we here at Roca, we believe that no young person is lost, even when they have lost all hope and trust for themselves. The population that we currently serve are at critical risk due to the ongoing exposure of complex trauma, repeat incarceration, substance use disorder, and the threat of early death. We had to learn very early on in our 33 years existence that we had to get specific on who our target population would be or should be. And we had to do this in a very short time, as we realized we had a combination of mixed, age groups in our building that, it wasn't beneficial, and in fact was actually dangerous and created more harm to all parties involved. Therefore, we had young people that were, at risk. Those were kind of that adolescents population who would benefit from prevention programs such as, the ones that occur at school or maybe at after school programs. And then we had the high risk, those who may have found themselves, got it. Those who may have found themselves in, a little bit of trouble, but, an early intervention program that had maybe some type of mentorships and structure were able to get them back on track. So the population left was indeed our most critical risk young people, those who were not ready, willing, or able to show up to any type of, previously mentioned programs that I stated above. And we at Roca wanted them all. So we focused our work specifically with these young people ages 16 to 24. And annually, we currently serve 1,000 men and 254 young mothers across 6 sites, 5 of which are in Massachusetts and 1 in Baltimore. So how do we do it? In the beginning, we start this work with, it's all about relentless outreach, right? And when I say outreach, this is not, hey, we're coming to your house, we're going to leave a card, or we're going to, make a phone call, and we're like, oh, they're not answering, and, we don't know what to do. We are banging down the doors. It might be borderline stalking, right? We just want to, love on them all we can, even though they got their hands out and they're like, nope, no way. I don't think there's anything wrong with me. I don't think there's anything I need to work on, right? But we're there to say something different, that we value who they are and know that change is possible, okay? And so we do the relentless outreach to build transformational relationships, right? In which these relationships help to develop the foundation for change. And so during the course of our relationships, we teach life-saving skills such as cognitive behavioral theory. Some of you may have known it as cognitive behavioral therapy, which still exists. However, this is a more relatable and simple form of that, version of that, which helps us understand the relationship between our thoughts, feelings, and our actions, and how all those things impact our lives. But first, we had to learn how trauma impacts the brain, because all our young people have been exposed to continuous and extensive trauma. So trauma is easy. What we learned is trauma is easily explained as fear that never turns off. And it actually changes the way the brain develops and functions. So I'm just going to get into a little quick science. Don't pay attention to the jargon, but just the information that's attached to it, right? And so what we learned was that the amygdala, which is the alarm bell that sounds off in our head when we, detect threats, whether they be real or, perceived, and keeps us in that state of, danger, always on alert, always scanning for, something is going to be wrong. And this is where our young people live. They live in this part of their brain, okay? Then there's the hippocampus, which is responsible for memory and learning. And this, in fact, reduces in volume. So when they're thinking, they're scanning, they're constantly in that bottom portion of their brain, the hippocampus signs off completely. It's a flat line, okay? There's no memory, there's no learning happening. They can't retain information, and it impacts their working memory. The other part of that is the top part of our brain, which is called the prefrontal cortex, right? This is responsible for decision-making, emotional control. This also reduces in size when they are living in that bottom, when they're constantly in a state of fight, flight, or freeze mode, which is a traumatic response, which makes it hard to understand the implications of their behaviors or, the ability to follow through on tasks. So we really needed to think about this information, which, you say 16 to 24, a lot of these kids are big, right? And so we're looking at them, we're like, well, how don't you know this stuff? You're a grown-ass woman or you're a grown man, right? And it's like, not really, right? As you get to know them, you get to learn about who they are, the trauma that they've been through, We attach it to the development of the brain, and therefore we understand that there's some deficits, okay? So we learned that due to immense trauma, a person who is constantly stuck in that survival mode or that bottom part of their brain, scanning for threats and danger all the time, there's a spin that forces them to react to every situation from a traumatic response, which is the fight, flight, freeze perspective, whether it is real or perceived. While all this is challenging, the good news is that we all have the capacity to heal from trauma, and we can actually rewire the brain. So hence that, old saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. That is untrue. You can indeed teach an old dog new tricks, such as myself. The idea is if you practice something consistently, like exercising or, changing or playing an instrument or changing some other behavior that has been unhelpful to you, you are likely to alter your brain and form a new pathway. So we teach young people to understand the connections between their thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And when a situation occurs, by the way, everything is a situation, right? Things just happen really rapidly. They all affect each other, which can create that cycle, that unhelpful, pattern where you feel stuck, right? Because it's comfortable. That's the only thing that we know. So we kind of live in that, and we practice that. Our anger, our fear, it all looks one way because that's what's kept us alive the whole time. So once a person can identify what that cycle looks like, then they can learn to disrupt them by using one of the 7 CBT skills, so they can make a better choice or a safer choice. Sometimes they may make the same choice, right? But the idea is to learn how these 3 things connect. All of our programs at Roca are designed for learning experiences. Our young people need trauma-informed services that can meet them where they're at and allows for mistakes and relapses. In addition to the CBT, we also use a harm reduction approach. And the strategies are not just for those who are suffering from substance use disorder, but are for every young person, because we recognize that change is not linear and it happens in incremental shifts. This work calls for us to be non-judgmental, non-coercive, and a delivery of services and resources for our population and the communities that they live in.
And I'm honored to be here with my colleague, Chianta. Had the privilege of visiting and talking with young people, and maybe some of you, hopefully, although I can't quite tell on the Zoom, in Northern Ireland a few times. And just to say that when we spoke with Peter and Chris, that there were a couple of key issues that, just to highlight what Chianta is saying, that could be transferable, and I'll try to write a note in the chat. So one is, our focus is on this group that doesn't show up. They're not going to go to a youth leadership program. They're not going to schools or whatever. And so if you're going to work with that group, that's a different piece of work than the group of people who are going to show up. 2 is to understand trauma and determine what trauma-informed responses you all can implement, or learn them so you can implement them. The 3rd thing is, if you're going to go to the group that's the hardest to reach, like they're out there, you're going to spend more time out there with them than you are waiting for them to come in. Another piece that's really important, as Chianta said, there's a difference between prevention work, early intervention work, intervention with that group that's way out there, and just suppression when people are getting arrested. I think that if you look at something like the stages of behavior change, harm reduction is a really helpful lens to look at those young people. I got to talk to Chris and Peter a little bit. I know you're struggling with drug issues. You sort of have historical trauma that's influencing a newer group. You've got some groups of young people that are just completely not connecting. So you have to kind of look at how you do that differently. And then I think the other key lesson that we've learned at Roca is really, how do you find partners who can work with you to wrap around the group that's way out there? So again, we're not here to teach about youth leadership and the incredible peacemaking work you've done. It's just phenomenal. But really, for this group is most isolated. And we've been in Baltimore, Maryland for 3 years and a few months. There is more violence in the city of Baltimore than the entire state of Massachusetts. So the biggest adaptation is really like safety on steroids. We have a very specific set of safety interventions. We're working with young people who carry guns. They're most likely to shoot or be shot. They're in very high risk situations. But in Baltimore, population of about 600,000 and declining, there's an average of 1 murder a day and anywhere from 3 to 9 non-fatal shootings a day. So the safety issues for young people and staff had to be dramatically adapted. We've been learning about the CBT and adapting our cognitive behavior theory over the past few years, getting it very frontline, user-friendly, highly mobile, be highly adapted to all kinds of environments. And in Baltimore was the first site we opened where everybody was starting with CBT, where the other sites were closed. We are clear that the outreach to these young people over and over and over and over again, whether they like us or not, and the CBT are the most important things. And what we've learned about trauma, and I think this is highly applicable to kind of where the group, as I understand from Chris and Peter's discussion and some of our other friends there, that's most out there, that behavior is really impacted by trauma. And the good news is you can change your brain, but it takes time. And 16 to 24-year-olds, you're looking about 18 to 24 months for any singular behavior change. So any effort at education, for engagement, for employment, we run work crews, are really about opportunities to help these young people develop the emotional regulation skills to understand what they think, feel, and do are different. And once they can learn to take an 8 to 12 second pause, they can then have agency to choose what they're doing as opposed to react. And so that's been a major, major difference. The other thing we've had to do, we do across Massachusetts and, in Baltimore, and the little bit I know, and please forgive me because I know probably just enough to be ignorant, that those groups of young people that you have that are most isolated, not showing up, angry, whatever, police are engaging with them. They're engaged in court systems, right? And so how you figure out with those partners to wrap around those young people so that they're not out there, right? That's the whole point. It's like, I got to find you. I'm going to fall in love with you, whether you want anything to do with me or not. You cannot get rid of me. And then I'm going to wrap around you so that we can try to keep you alive, or re-engage. But that takes time. And the other thing that's probably worth saying is if you're going to do programming for the group that doesn't show up, your programming has to tolerate the fact they come, they go, they love you, they hate you, they threaten you, you had 3 good months, and then they're like high again and dealing drugs. So you have to keep adapting to that risky behavior. Think about it through a harm reduction lens so that over time, right, this is not go to this program and 3 months later, go to this program and a year later. That group is in a fundamentally different place. The last thing I would say is you don't want to mix those groups. It doesn't matter if they're the same family, doesn't matter if they're on the same block, because the research, the data, real life experience from making mistakes is that you put lower risk people with higher risk. It's not, people aren't getting inspired in the right direction. So if Chris is lower risk and I'm higher risk, I am not getting inspired by Chris. Chris, unfortunately, is adapting his behavior to mine. So that's a key issue as well. So remember, we're not running a program where we think young people are going to show up, and we can't hang a flyer out there, and we can't just waltz around, right? These are young people who are in between arrests. They all have felony charges. If they're in court, they're blowing probation, whatever, right? So we get young people a number of different ways, referrals from police, probation. In Baltimore, because the non-fatal shootings are so high, we get a list every day of non-fatal shooting victims of our age group. We see if we know them or not, and then we go try to find where they are and knock on the door, find them in a hospital bed. We often just get name and an address. It may or may not be right. So we have to go at this a number of ways. We track young people and we track staff so we can get better. It's about 8 to 10 door knocks to find a young person average in Massachusetts and 12 to 14 in Baltimore. Sometimes when they start realizing we're coming, they'll like hide across the street and look, they'll pretend there's somebody else, they'll hide under the bed. So, once we can find a mother or a grandmother to sneak us in at 7 a.m, we have fine, good relationships with good cops who So sorry, Chris, you're I'm just going to pick on you. So let's say we can't find Chris. So we go find the data guy in the Western District and go, have you seen Chris? And they go right up on their computer because their cameras everywhere. And they're like, yeah, Chris is actually right in that alley right now. So then we'll call another staff member and just send him out to the alley to find Chris. So again, we're going after the group who can't show up. So it's a model that works that way. It's 2-year intensive and 2-year less intensive. So if people are ready to show up or go to a leadership program or a job program, we'll get them there. We'll like deliver them with a bow, right? We pretty much work with everyone who doesn't want to show up. We've had a few exceptions more in Baltimore because it's more dangerous. A couple of examples, we'll get referred somebody. We find out they have a lot of bodies on their head. They've already killed a lot of people. And they're just too dangerous. We just can't get there. Sometimes we've gotten a referral and we'll find out a young person has a bounty on their head to be taken out. So we kind of will work with the cops to clear the block to go meet the kid. And we'll try. We have had a few of those young people. I mean, it's one thing if they slam the door and pretend they're somebody else and tell us they hate us and start and stop. But we have had a few young people that are pretty seriously into crime and who, after the third time said, look, I did this because my boy Var said I had to talk to you, but if you come back here, I'm taking you out. But it's rare. So yes, we couldn't do the work without thinking about safety. And so we have very explicit sort of practices and sort of guidelines around safety. There's sort of some fundamental underlining. There's an entire safety analysis about individuals or certain groups or certain gangs or drug crews. There's also a real-time effort. So each team kind of lives on a group text, right? So go back to Chris here. I'm picking on, let's say, Chris is in this group and he's beefing with Peter's group somewhere else. And Chianta's going to bring Peter back to the center. She'd say, I'm coming back with Peter. And we'll go, oh, Chris is still here. Don't bring Peter back. Drive him around the block, do something else. If we can negotiate some relationship stuff, we do that, but we have to do real time. So if someone gets shot or something's dangerous, we then have to let everybody know on the team and figure out how to do that. So that's really key. We don't let people go out without knowing. I'm old enough. We used to go wing around the streets at all kinds of times. So did Chianta. Day and night, really totally unattended. But even in Massachusetts, we just don't let that happen anymore. We can't keep people safe. We need to know that, if Chianta's out looking for Carol there, we need on Saturday because some crisis happened. We need to know. So we spend a lot of time doing that.